Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive. If you're joining us today, you are likely that person who always wants to know how things actually work underneath the hood. You're the learner.
The one who reads the footnotes.
Exactly. Maybe you're prepping for a massive strategy meeting or catching up on the latest tectonic shifts in tech, or perhaps you're just insanely curious about where the world is heading next. Whatever brought you here, we are just so thrilled to have you with us. Today is Saturday, February 28, 2026.
Just take a second to let that date sink in.
Yeah, think about where our digital landscape currently stands right now in early 2026. The ground beneath our feet is shifting faster than ever before, so we've got a massive mission for this deep dive. Today we're exploring the complex, rapidly evolving, and frankly sometimes slightly terrifying relationship between human attention and artificial intelligence.
It's a sprawling topic. It touches literally every aspect of how you interact with the modern world, from the way you learn, to the way you vote, to the way you protect your own mental energy.
We're going to look at how machines are learning to act like curious humans. We're going to look at how human brains, and that includes yours, are physically reacting and sometimes completely burning out from the algorithms we interact with every single day.
And finally, we're going to look at how businesses are desperately trying to pivot and measure what actually matters in this completely new reality.
Yeah, we have a phenomenal stack of sources to get through today. First, we're looking at predictions from some of the top AI experts over at UC Berkeley. Then we have an incredibly revealing research paper published in MDPI. That one is on algorithmic burnout and how young adults are biologically and psychologically resisting personalized AI feeds.
It's a heavy one, but so important.
It really is. And after that, we're bringing in two cutting-edge industry reports from Russell Herder and Elation Communications, focusing on the absolute death of vanity metrics.
It's a long time coming.
Definitely. And to kick it all off, we have a fascinating technical paper on teaching AI to play action video games using a concept called curiosity. To help guide you through the heavy science, the neuroscience, and the synthesis of all these incredible documents, I have our resident expert here with me.
I am very much looking forward to digging into this. There is a profound narrative connecting all these sources today. It's really a story about the collision between artificial systems trying to mimic human traits and human beings trying to protect their cognitive autonomy from those very systems.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start with our first topic, which is about how AI is actually learning right now, today. And we're going to do that by talking about video games.
The best testing ground.
Right. Specifically, a study where researchers taught an AI to play classic action games. We're talking Mortal Kombat, Jackie Chan, the Kung Fu Master, and Street Fighter. Now, to understand why this is a big deal, we need to understand how AI has historically learned to do things. Can you break down the baseline mechanics of how machine learning usually works in these environments? And, how this specific study completely flipped the script?
Yeah, absolutely. So traditional machine learning in these environments relies on something you are already intimately familiar with in your own life. Rewards.
Simple carrots and sticks.
Exactly. Usually an AI learns through what we call extrinsic rewards. In a video game, an extrinsic reward is incredibly obvious. It's getting a high score, or defeating an opponent, or successfully moving to the next level.
Right. The game literally tells you that you did a good job.
The AI tries random things, and when it accidentally does something that increases its score, the system registers that as a positive outcome. It updates its internal policy to favor that specific action in the future. This approach, reinforcement learning, has been very successful for years, but it has a fatal flaw.
Which is?
It completely falls apart in environments where rewards are sparse. If the AI has to perform a long, complex sequence of actions, say navigating a maze, pulling a lever, and dodging a trap before it ever sees a single point added to its score, it essentially gets paralyzed.
Because it's not getting that hit of dopamine, so to speak.
Exactly. It doesn't know what to do because it isn't getting any immediate feedback telling it whether it's on the right track.
So it just wanders around aimlessly because there's no breadcrumb trail of points to follow. But this MDPI study introduced a completely different mechanism. They used an intrinsic curiosity module combined with an algorithm called asynchronous advantage actor critic.
Yes, the ICM and the A3C.
Let's look past those heavy academic naming conventions for a second. What is actually happening inside the machine when we introduce curiosity?
The intrinsic curiosity module essentially mimics the biological imperative of human curiosity. Instead of waiting for the game to hand it a point, the extrinsic reward we just talked about, The AI generates its own intrinsic reward based entirely on how surprised it is.
Surprised. How does a machine get surprised?
Here is how the mechanics operate. The system looks at its current state, let's say a specific visual frame of Street Fighter, and the action it's about to take, like pressing the punch button. It then tries to predict what the very next frame will look like.
Okay, so it's guessing the future.
Exactly. What will happen to the opponent? What will happen to the background? Now, if the actual outcome differs from the AI's prediction, that generates a prediction error. The AI encountered something it did not expect.
And it likes that.
It loves it. In this framework, that error is translated directly into a reward. The system literally rewards the AI for encountering novelty and uncertainty. It is mathematically incentivized to find things it does not understand.
That is wild. To put that in perspective for you listening, think about it like this. Imagine you are visiting a brand new city for a conference. The traditional machine learning approach, the extrinsic reward approach, would be you getting off the plane, looking at your GPS, and walking in a perfectly straight line directly to your hotel to drop off your bags.
Because the hotel is the objective.
Right. You achieve your immediate goal, you get the reward of a completed task. But the curiosity-driven approach is like deciding to explore the city just to see what's around the next corner. You take a random alleyway, you find a weird little underground coffee shop, you get briefly lost in a local market. You're seeking out the unknown simply because it's unknown. You are rewarding yourself with the experience of novelty rather than a specific destination.
That analogy perfectly captures the shift in programming. And when the researchers combined that curiosity module with the asynchronous algorithm, the A3C, the efficiency just skyrocketed.
How so?
The system essentially creates multiple versions of the AI agent, and they all play the game in parallel at the same time across different environments. They explore these digital cities independently, and then they constantly send what they've learned back to a global network to update the master policy.
Let's look at the actual data points from this study, because they really caught my eye. They tested this curious AI against standard methods, and the performance gap was massive.
It really was. The Curious AI hit an overall task completion rate of nearly 85% across the testing environments.
Wow.
Compare that to barely 78% for standard DeepQ networks, the DQN models, and just 72% for the baseline A3C algorithm without the Curiosity module attached.
So that's a huge jump.
And it wasn't just better at completing the games, it was remarkably faster. The Curious AI reached optimal policies in about 150 hours of training time, whereas the standard models took well over 200 hours.
By rewarding its own curiosity, the AI learned the mechanics of its environment 25% faster.
Yes.
But let's dig into the game-specific details, because the AI didn't perform equally across the board. It absolutely thrived in the dynamic environment of Mortal Kombat, achieving over an 87.3% adaptability rate.
It was incredibly fluid there.
And in Street Fighter, it achieved a massive task completion rate of 94.8%.
Yeah.
It effectively mastered the game, completely adapting to opponents who were using highly complex fighting techniques.
Yeah.
But then you look at Jackie Chan, the Kung Fu master, and it really struggled. It barely cracked a 42.1% completion rate.
It hit a wall.
Yeah, if curiosity is so powerful, why did it hit a brick wall on that specific game?
That discrepancy highlights the current limits of even the most advanced AI. Think about the nature of those games. Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter are highly dynamic, but the core mechanics are about reacting to an opponent in a relatively confined space.
Right. The camera doesn't move much, but the fighters are always doing crazy moves.
Exactly. The opponent is always doing something new. So the Curiosity module rewarded the AI for trying new moves, dodging, and discovering new states of the opponent's behavior. The immediate novelty was incredibly high.
It was getting constant hits of surprise.
But the Jackie Chan game in this study presented a much more static, highly complex environmental structure. It's a side-scroller. There were intricate visual patterns and very specific sequential actions required to progress through a level that didn't immediately yield high prediction errors.
So because the background wasn't constantly changing and surprising the AI just got bored.
Essentially, yes. The AI couldn't just rely on the immediate novelty of hand-to-hand combat. It needed a longer-term hierarchical strategy to navigate the complex level design. And that's where the pure curiosity drive hit a ceiling.
It's fascinating.
It shows us that while curiosity is a powerful driver for exploration, balancing that exploration with exploitation, actually utilizing what you know to achieve a long-term, multi-step goal in a static environment, That remains a highly complex hurdle for machine learning.
I want you to just imagine an AI that isn't merely following a strict set of rules to maximize a score, but is actively programmed to seek out the unknown. An algorithm whose core mathematical imperative is to be surprised. It fundamentally shifts our understanding of machine learning from a passive optimization tool to an active, relentless explorer.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this transition from machines that optimize to machines that actively explore has profound implications for our society right now. And that brings us perfectly to our second source, the 2026 AI reality check from the experts at UC Berkeley.
Because we are looking at a world where these highly advanced autonomous learning systems are no longer confined to playing Street Fighter in a lab.
Not at all. They are the driving force of the global economy, the arbiters of our information, and the fabric of our daily social interactions.
The UC Berkeley piece is fascinating because they asked their absolute top AI researchers what they are watching for in 2026. What immediately stands out is this intense duality. We have massive economic reality colliding with boundless scientific optimism. Let's start with Stuart Russell, a legendary professor of computer science there.
He's a titan in the field.
He points out that the current and planned spending on AI data centers represents literally the largest technology project in human history.
The scale of investment is difficult to even conceptualize. We're talking about trillions of dollars rerouting global supply chains and putting unprecedented strain on national power grids, all to feed these data centers.
Just massive, massive physical infrastructure.
But Russell issues a very stark warning. He says we might be in the middle of a historic bubble.
Yeah, he notes that the performance of large language models, the technology behind the chatbots everyone uses, seems to have plateaued.
There are clear theoretical limits to how efficiently these models can learn complex reasoning simply by predicting the next word in a sequence. If the technology plateaus before it delivers the autonomous, world-changing financial returns that investors are betting on, and this massive data center bubble bursts, the economic damage to the global market will be severe.
That's the terrifying economic baseline. But then you flip the coin and look at Jennifer Chase, the dean of the College of Computing, Data Science, and Society at Berkeley. She brings this incredible wave of optimism to the discussion.
She really does.
She argues that while the economic risks of the tech sector are real, AI is simultaneously accelerating scientific discoveries in ways that were previously completely unimaginable. We're talking about personalized agents that are helping researchers synthesize decades of data, map complex proteins, and develop new materials at a pace that humanity has never seen.
It creates a fascinating tension. We have a potential economic house of cards built on technology that is, at the exact same time, genuinely revolutionizing human knowledge in the hard sciences.
But that tension isn't just happening in the stock market or in laboratories. It is bleeding right into our social fabric. Let's look at the crisis of trust and truth. Hani Farid, a professor of information at Berkeley, is focused entirely on deepfakes.
And in 2026, his concerns are more valid than ever.
He makes the point that deepfakes are no longer a novelty. They aren't a parlor trick you show your friends anymore. They are routine, highly scalable, and practically free to produce.
And they have completely blurred the line between what is real and what is fabricated. Farid asks a critical question. How does a society adapt technically, legally, and culturally to a world where seeing is simply no longer believing?
It completely fractures our shared reality.
Think about the implications for journalism, for the court system, for global diplomacy, and for democracy itself.
He brings up this crucial asymmetry that really stuck with me. It takes absolute zero effort to create a fake video or a fake piece of audio today. Just a few keystrokes, and you can generate a video of a CEO declaring bankruptcy or a politician saying something horrific.
It takes seconds.
But it takes an enormous, painstaking amount of effort for independent researchers to analyze that file, look for digital artifacts, and definitively debunk it. The lie travels around the globe while the truth is still tying its shoes. The asymmetry of effort is completely destroying our information ecosystem.
And as if the threat to our shared public reality isn't enough, Deirdre Mulligan, another professor at Berkeley, brings up a point about the invasion of our private reality that is deeply unsettling.
The chatbot logs.
We have to look at the chatbot logs. Millions of people today use AI chatbots for incredibly intimate things. They use them for emotional support when they're lonely, for spiritual guidance, for relationship counseling, and even for preliminary legal advice.
People are pouring out their deepest fears, follies, and fantasies to these machines.
And the dangerous, unspoken assumption is that these interactions are private. We treat that chat window like a locked diary.
But Mulligan points to several current examples that completely shatter this illusion of privacy. The most tragic is the case of Adam Rain.
Yes, that case really highlights the danger.
His ChatGPT logs, which cataloged his profound struggles and mental health decline before his death by suicide, are now central evidence in a lawsuit filed by his family. These private, desperate, highly vulnerable conversations with a machine are now matters of public legal record, dissected by lawyers in an open courtroom.
And it extends far beyond civil lawsuits. Mulligan notes that the Department of Homeland Security has successfully demanded a user's prompts from an AI company.
Which is chilling.
And in a massive ongoing copyright lawsuit, a court ordered OpenAI to save all user chats as evidence. Your deepest, most private thoughts, typed into a comforting, minimalist interface in your bedroom at 2 in the morning, are data points. They can be subpoenaed, analyzed, aggregated, and exposed.
Let's push that a bit further, because this privacy nightmare sets up Jodi Halpern's observation perfectly. She talks about the epidemic of human isolation. We are seeing AI companies aggressively market companion chatbots. We already know from the data that roughly 1/3 of teenagers today prefer talking about their feelings to a bot rather than a human being.
A third of our youth find a machine more emotionally safe than a person.
Halpern points out that this dependence is unfortunately associated with higher risks of suicide and depression, because the business models of these platforms are specifically designed to manipulate human emotion and incentivize constant overuse.
And the market is expanding to an even more vulnerable demographic. Halpern notes that buddies for toddlers are an emerging market right now.
Cobblers.
Yes. They are rolling out to the public without any real regulatory guardrails or long-term psychological studies. We are literally giving toddlers AI companions to talk to during their most critical developmental window.
How does a toddler, whose brain is just beginning to form concepts of socialization, learn true empathy if their primary interaction is with a sycophantic bot?
That is the core philosophical and psychological danger. These AI companions are programmed to agree with the user. They are programmed to validate them constantly, to never challenge them, and to provide completely frictionless interaction.
But human relationships are built on friction.
Exactly. They are built on navigating differing perspectives, handling rejection, feeling misunderstood and working through it, and developing a mutual empathic curiosity about another autonomous human being.
Right.
If a child's foundational emotional scaffolding is built by a machine that is algorithmically designed to please them, how do they eventually participate in a society with real people who have completely different, sometimes opposing viewpoints?
So what does this all mean? We've talked about machines learning to be curious, and we've talked about the macro-level impact of these AI tools on truth, privacy, and early childhood development. But what is actually happening inside our heads right now? Let's transition to our third source, and this is where we get into the heavy neuroscience.
This is where it gets incredibly visceral.
We're looking at an incredibly revealing research paper published in NDPI on algorithmic burnout and digital well-being. And that is paired with neurological data from Curious on how the human brain physically reacts to social media algorithms.
This is where we shift from the theoretical impacts of AI to the raw biological reality. The Curious study took 100 participants. These were healthy adults, relatively evenly split between men and women, with an average age of about 27.
So digital natives, basically.
Exactly. They hooked them up to a 24-channel EEG system to monitor their brainwaves. They put these participants through 30-minute social media sessions and tracked exactly what happened to their neurology in real time as they scrolled through algorithmically curated feeds.
Let's make this real for the listener, because reading a list of brainwaves can feel like reading a medical textbook. Let's talk about what these brainwaves actually feel like. What is happening to our alpha waves the moment we open an app?
Think of alpha waves as your brain sitting on a quiet porch with a cup of coffee. They operate in the 8 to 12 hertz range. When your alpha waves are elevated, you are in a relaxed, disengaged, calm state. Your brain is idling peacefully.
Sounds nice.
It is. But the EEG data showed that the absolute split-second participants opened a social media app and began engaging with an algorithmically curated feed, their alpha waves plummeted. The brain was immediately ripped out of its resting state and thrown into a state of incredibly high cognitive load.
And as those alpha waves plummet, the beta and gamma waves spike. If alpha is sitting on a porch, beta is driving a car in heavy traffic, and gamma is swerving to avoid a sudden accident. Beta waves are associated with focused attention and mental stimulation. Gamma waves are associated with intense concentration, higher-order cognitive processing, and stress. The algorithms are literally revving the brain's engine into the red zone, keeping it in a constant state of high alert.
The Curious paper noted that gamma power went up by over 60% during high-reward moments on short-form video platforms.
60%?
Yes. And these are moments specifically engineered by the algorithm to spike dopamine in the ventral striatum. You can physically feel this when you are scrolling. It's that subtle elevation in your heart rate, the shallowing of your breath, that localized feeling of tension behind your eyes.
I know exactly that feeling.
But what's truly alarming is what the researchers identified as the doom scrolling effect.
Huh.
This elevated beta and gamma activity didn't just stop when the user closed the app. The brain remained in a state of high cognitive excitation long after the phone was put away in their pocket.
The data showed it takes the brain about 15 minutes longer to calm down, meaning for those alpha waves to finally recover and rise back to baseline after looking at emotionally charged content compared to looking at simple, neutral content like comedy sketches or memes. The hangover effect, essentially. Now, I want to be incredibly clear here, because the sources mention political news content as a primary trigger for these prolonged beta wave spikes. We are looking at this strictly from a neurological and scientific perspective. We are not validating or invalidating any political ideology, left or right. We are impartially reporting the biological data.
Right.
When the human brain engages with highly charged, divisive, or crisis-related news on an algorithmic feed, it physically struggles to return to a state of rest. It gets locked in that swirling state.
The brain does not distinguish between political affiliations. It responds to the emotional intensity, the perceived threat, and the outrage. That is what keeps the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala highly engaged. And over time, this constant chronic state of excitation leads to severe exhaustion.
Which brings in the delta waves.
Yes. The study found that heavy users, those scrolling for extended periods, started showing increased delta wave activity while they were wide awake. Now, delta waves are usually dominant during deep restorative sleep.
So their brains are trying to sleep while they are staring at their phones.
When you see elevated delta activity in an awake adult who is staring at a screen, it is a biological marker of profound cognitive exhaustion and mental fatigue. The brain is essentially begging for sleep while the eyes are still open.
And that biological exhaustion translates directly into our psychological behavior, which brings us to the MDPI study on young adults. This PLS-SM study looked at 637 young adults to figure out how these exhausted delta-heavy brains actually fight back against digital persuasion.
It's a fascinating bridge between neurology and consumer behavior.
For years, marketers have operated on the assumption that hyper-personalized ads that know exactly what you searched for, where you live, what you like, are the holy grail of advertising. But this study proves the existence of the personalization paradox. Over-targeting doesn't increase engagement, it exhausts the brain. It creates perceived ad fatigue.
We all experience this. It's that moment when you realize you are being hunted by an algorithm. But the study found something completely counterintuitive about this fatigue. You would logically assume that ad fatigue directly causes a user to resist an ad or skip it. But the rigorous data models showed that ad fatigue actually has no direct effect on your resistance.
Wait, really? Let's use a real-world example. Say I look up a pair of running shoes once, and for the next 3 weeks, those exact shoes follow me onto every website, every video, every social feed. I am incredibly fatigued by this ad. The data says that fatigue doesn't make me directly resist it.
Not directly. The fatigue acts through a cognitive filter. Ad fatigue only leads to active resistance if it triggers one of two intermediary mechanisms within your brain. It has to affect your perceived relevance, or it has to trigger your advertising literacy. It's not the sheer repetition that makes you swipe away, it's the fact that the repetition makes you hyper-aware of the manipulation.
Let's break down those weapons of resistance. The study identifies 3 main ways humans are fighting back against algorithmic persuasion: digital well-being, advertising literacy, and perceived relevance. Let's start with perceived relevance, because it is a massive double-edged sword.
Perceived relevance is simply how closely an ad aligns with your current immediate needs. Initially, high relevance is incredibly effective. If you are researching a vacation to Italy and an ad shows you a highly rated affordable hotel in Rome, you are likely to click it. Your brain processes it thoughtfully because it solves a problem.
Sure, that's helpful.
But the study found a distinct tipping point. If an ad is too relevant, If it feels like the algorithm is reading your text messages or accessing private geolocation data, it triggers a psychological phenomenon called reactance.
Reactance. That is
Mhm.
the perfect word for it. It's that visceral feeling when you look at your phone and say, okay, that is just creepy. Were they listening to my conversation?
Reactance is a powerful motivational state that occurs when you feel your autonomy is being threatened. You feel surveilled, your private boundaries have been breached. And when that happens, relevance backfires completely. You rebel against the ad, not because it's a bad product or even because you don't want the product, but to reassert your own free will against the machine. You actively resist just to prove you are not a puppet.
And then we have advertising literacy. This is your ability to recognize when you're being manipulated. It's your awareness of sponsored content, persuasive tactics, and unseen data tracking.
Right, your radar for marketing.
The study found that higher advertising literacy strongly predicts resistance. But you don't just use this literacy in a vacuum. It works synergistically with the third weapon, digital well-being. Digital well-being isn't just utilizing a screen time app. It's the active metacognitive ability to regulate your emotions and maintain psychological boundaries in a digital space.
The structural model in the paper showed that digital well-being was actually the strongest direct predictor of resistance to persuasion.
More than literacy.
Yes. People with higher digital well-being are less emotionally drained. They haven't let their delta waves spike. Because they aren't exhausted, they have the cognitive bandwidth to deploy their advertising literacy and critically evaluate an ad rather than just passively accepting it or mindlessly scrolling past it in a daze.
The researchers also broke the data down by demographics.
Yeah.
This is where you see how different brains handle the algorithm differently. They found significant differences between men and women, for instance.
The data revealed that men in the sample tended to process these targeted ads more critically through the lens of advertising literacy. There was a much stronger link for men between their literacy and their active resistance. They were more likely to consciously counter-argue the persuasion attempt in their heads.
And for women.
Women, on the other hand, experienced a much harsher direct hit from ad fatigue. The emotional overload of the constant intimate algorithmic targeting led more directly to resistance through emotional disengagement and withdrawal from the platform entirely.
At education level played a fascinating role, too. You would naturally think the higher your education, the more you actively use your advertising literacy to resist ads. But the study found a plateau.
A very clear plateau.
People with high school or undergraduate education relied heavily on explicitly triggering their advertising literacy to resist. But for those with doctoral degrees, the impact of advertising literacy on resistance practically disintegrated in the data models.
It suggests a saturation point. Highly educated users may already possess such ingrained baseline awareness of persuasion tactics that explicit advertising literacy no longer acts as an active conscious trigger. It is just their default state of being. They don't have to think about resisting. They just do.
There was also a really interesting finding about chronic ad skippers.
Yeah.
The people who immediately hover their thumb over the bottom right corner of the screen the second a video starts, just waiting for the skip button to appear.
That's most of us, honestly.
Right. The data show that these heavy skippers actually process less of the ad's relevance. They aren't evaluating whether the ad is useful to them. They have developed a pure automatic behavioral reflex to resist, completely bypassing the cognitive filter.
It is a biological defense mechanism against the cognitive load we discussed earlier. If your brain subconsciously knows that evaluating every single hyper-targeted ad will spike your beta waves and eventually lead to complete delta wave exhaustion, it creates an automatic reflex to just skip. It is protecting its limited cognitive resources from the algorithm.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If human brains are physically burning out, if our delta waves are spiking, if we are developing automatic physical reflexes to skip ads, and if we are utilizing psychological reactants to actively rebel against hyper-personalized targeting, how on earth do businesses survive?
They have to change everything.
Exactly. The old playbook of blasting the internet with hyper-targeted noise is clearly broken. And that brings us to our final section, the absolute death of vanity metrics in 2026. Businesses are waking up to the fact that they have to completely change how they measure success because the human brain is rejecting their old methods.
This is a necessary, frankly overdue evolution. For the last 15 years, the digital economy was built on the arrogant assumption that human attention was an infinite resource to be strip-mined by algorithms.
But the neurological and psychological data we just discussed proves beyond a doubt that attention is highly finite.
And it aggressively degrades under algorithmic pressure. The industry reports from Russell Herder and Elation Communications make it very clear. In 2026, metrics like raw page views, generic likes, and total follower counts are officially dead. They are useless to a modern boardroom.
As the Elation report perfectly puts it, these metrics are relics of a digital era obsessed with noise instead of meaning. Let's break down the new key performance indicators that actual leadership teams and investors are demanding in 2026. Russell Herder lays out 5 crucial website metrics that prove real return on investment. Number 1, core web vitals. This is all about speed and stability.
And this directly ties back to the cognitive load we just unpacked. Core Web Vitals measure how fast the main content appears, how quickly the page responds to a physical tap, and whether the layout jumps around while loading.
If a site is slow or visually unstable, the user's brain, which is already fatigued by the algorithm before they even click the link, simply abandons ship. You lose them instantly.
Russell Herder points out that from a pure business standpoint, you're paying massive amounts of money to attract visitors who never even see your value proposition because your site speed spiked their frustration levels.
Number 2 is conversion rate by source. We used to just look at a blended conversion rate, say 2% of all visitors to your site buy something. But Herder argues that blending the data hides the real truth of what the algorithm is doing.
When you break it down by source, you might find that organic search traffic people who are actively looking for a solution to a problem converts at a highly profitable 4%. But traffic from hyper-targeted paid social media ads might convert at less than 1%.
Knowing that difference isn't just a marketing detail, it is a fundamental budget decision. It tells you exactly where the algorithm is actually working to connect you with interested humans and where it is just generating empty, accidental clicks from fatigued scrollers.
Which perfectly aligns with metric number 3, customer acquisition cost mapped against lifetime value.
The SAC.
Yes. It doesn't matter if an algorithmic ad campaign brings in 10,000 new leads. If those leads are so low quality that they cost more to acquire and manage than they will ever spend with your business.
Metric number 4 is engagement quality. And this is a massive shift away from the old standard of bounce rate. Let's unpack why bounce rate was such a terrible metric.
Bounce rate was fundamentally flawed because it lacked all context. If a user lands on your page, reads a deeply informative 3,000-word article, gets exactly what they needed, feels great about your brand, and leaves completely satisfied, historical analytics recorded that as a bounce, a failure.
Which is crazy, because that's a huge win.
Exactly. Engagement quality looks at meaningful human behaviors instead. How far did they scroll down the page? Did they unmute and watch the video? Did they highlight text? Did they click on a deeper link? It asks, did the user extract real value instead of just how many seconds did they stay?
And the 5th metric from Russell Herder is one that so many organizations have historically ignored, but in 2026, it is financially and legally dangerous to do so. Accessibility compliance. We're talking about making sure a website is fully functional for people using screen readers or people who navigate via keyboard instead of a mouse.
The legal and financial risks here are massive and immediate. ADA-related website lawsuits surged by nearly 37% in the first half of 2025 alone, with thousands of cases filed in just 6 months.
And by April of 2026, government entities are federally mandated to meet strict accessibility standards.
But beyond the legal risk, an accessible website is fundamentally a better, faster, more logically structured website for every single user, which loops right back to improving those initial core web vitals.
So that's the technical side of the new metrics. But the Elation Communications report takes us into the behavioral and emotional metrics that are defining 2026. They argue that we are moving entirely away from massive, anonymous broadcast audiences and shifting toward micro-communities. Because of that, your total follower count means absolutely nothing. What actually matters is community participation.
It's a profound shift from asking who follows you to asking who actually shows up for you. Who is leaving a substantive, thoughtful comment? Who is sharing your content with their own context added? Who is collaborating in your forums? Participation is a metric of human belonging, and in an era of intense algorithmic isolation, belonging is the most incredibly valuable commodity a brand can offer.
Another massive shift Elation points out is the move to return engagement. For years, every brand, every creator, every company wanted a viral moment. They wanted a trend on the front page. But Elation calls virality a sugar high.
And that is exactly what it is. Virality spikes your numbers for 24 hours, you get a massive hit of dopamine, and then the algorithm moves on and everyone forgets you exist. The most important question for any organization in 2026 is, do people come back? Are you a habit?
Do they actively choose to open your newsletter every week? Do they return to your podcast?
High return engagement proves that you're providing consistent, genuine value rather than just exploiting a momentary gap in a user's cognitive defenses.
And here's where the technology catches up to the psychology. Elation highlights the rapid rise of AI-powered sentiment intelligence. AI is no longer just serving ads. It is being used by brands to decode the exact emotional temperature of an audience at a massive scale.
This is a major leap from the old binary positive versus negative sentiment analysis. In 2026, AI can analyze tens of thousands of comments, reviews, and interactions to determine nuanced emotional states. Is the audience feeling hopeful? Are they hesitant? Are they deeply frustrated, purely curious, or uncertain? It acts as an incredibly precise emotional radar for organizations.
And all of this culminates in Elation's final metric, real-world impact. We are finally moving past asking, did this piece of content perform well online, to asking, did this content actually change your perception? Did it drive an action in the physical world? Did it create tangible momentum?
What these new metrics fundamentally represent is a paradigm shift in how we value human attention. Businesses have finally realized that treating the listener, treating you as a human being whose time, energy, and emotional bandwidth are incredibly valuable, is the only sustainable strategy left. The era of the endless algorithmic grind is yielding to a demand for actual, measurable value.
I want to connect this directly to you listening right now. When you feel that algorithmic burnout, when your brain gets exhausted and your delta waves spike, and you actively swipe past an ad, or when your reactance flares up because an ad is too creepy, or when you leave a website because it's slow or isn't accessible, your actions are not just lost in the void. You are actively shaping these new metrics.
Your psychological resistance, your demand for digital well-being and relevance is literally forcing the internet, forcing the algorithms, and forcing massive corporations to become more human-centric. You have agency in this system.
It is a profound realization that human resistance is the friction that forces technological evolution. All right, let's take a breath and recap the incredible journey we've been on today. We started by exploring how AI is literally learning through mathematically programmed curiosity, mastering video games like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter by rewarding its own surprise, but struggling when it lacks long-term strategic vision.
We looked at the UC Berkeley predictions for 2026, navigating the terrifying economic bubble of AI data centers, the asymmetry of deepfakes destroying our shared truth, and the privacy nightmare of your intimate chatbot logs being used in public lawsuits.
We went deep into the visceral neuroscience and psychology of algorithmic burnout. We look at how our alpha waves plummet and our delta waves spike, and how we use digital well-being and advertising literacy to fight back against the personalization paradox.
And finally, we saw how businesses are reacting to this human resistance by officially killing vanity metrics and pivoting to measure real emotional impact, true accessibility, and return engagement.
We covered an enormous amount of ground today, synthesizing computational algorithms, neurophysiology, psychology, and corporate strategy. But as we look at all these pieces together, there is one final, somewhat provocative thought I want to leave you with, combining two very specific points from our sources today.
Yes, earlier we discussed Jody Halpern's warning from UC Berkeley about toddlers who are beginning to learn socialization and empathy from AI companion bots. Bots that are programmed to be sycophantic, to always agree, and to never offer the healthy friction of a differing human perspective.
Right.
At the same time, we just discussed the Elation Communications report, which details how brands are now utilizing advanced AI-powered sentiment intelligence to measure human emotion, read our hesitations and frustrations, and meticulously tailor content to those emotions at scale.
Okay, where's this going?
This raises an incredibly important question for the near future. What happens in the next generation when the highly advanced AI we use to measure, predict, and manipulate human emotion is analyzing a population of humans whose core emotional scaffolding and capacity for empathy were originally shaped by AI companions? Are we slowly creating a closed loop of artificial empathy where machines are reading the emotions of humans who learned how to feel for machines?
Wow, a closed loop of artificial empathy. That is going to keep me up at night. That is a profound thought to chew on, and that is exactly why we do this. To the learner listening to us right now, thank you for taking this massive deep dive with us today. It's a complex, rapidly shifting world out there, but understanding the mechanisms behind the screen is the first step to mastering them. Stay curious, actively protect your digital well-being, and keep questioning the algorithms around you. We'll see you next time.